Hello, and welcome to Adventures in Regression Therapy. I'm Steve Burgess, hypnotherapist and regression specialist, and together with members of my team, we'll be introducing you to the fascinating world of past life regression. In each episode, we'll be discussing the importance of regression therapy, the range of physical, emotional, and spiritual issues it can help with, and sharing some of our clients' stories from the many thousands of regression sessions we've facilitated over the years. We hope you enjoy the ride with us as we explore the power of past life regression. Hello, and welcome to Adventures in Regression Therapy with me, Steve Burgess, and my team member and colleague, Monique Glover. And here I am in Canada at Monique's home. Makes a change for us to be in the same room together. Usually we're doing these several thousand miles apart. I've been here for a few days with Monique. Monique put on my one-man show, The Power of Past Life Regression, at a theatre here in Canada, in Nova Scotia, a few days ago, which went very, very well. And a lot of people were amazed to hear some of my past life regression stories about the incredible healings that past life regression has created for them over the years. But today what we're going to talk about is another famous past life. We're continuing this short series of famous past lives where we have had some clients over the years who appear to have been very, very famous personalities in their previous lifetimes. And the one that we've both, in a way, been working on together in these last few years is a lady over here in Canada who appears to have been, or doesn't appear to have been, who was the reincarnation of Alexandra, the wife of Tsar Nicholas II. So I was doing the therapy sessions with this lady, but this lady is a very, very close friend of Monique's, and it was Monique who put her onto me. So after the sessions, Monique had very intense discussions with her friend about what came through in the sessions and the regressions. So Monique's got almost as much information about this and knowledge as I have, having done the sessions. And her friend over here has given us permission to talk about this, obviously without mentioning who she is. So what happens, this lady is working on a severe anxiety state, and we did quite a few regression sessions. And then one day she went into this past life where she felt herself as a woman with a young family. And what actually happened is she went straight to the end of Alexandra's life. Now, at the time, we didn't know that she was Alexandra. It was just another past life.
And that's typical, correct? That to let people know about you talked about in your one-man show, that it's very typical to go to the death first, that seems to often be the big thing, and then maybe filter through other minor events afterwards.
And the other thing is, she didn't know anything about Alexandra. She didn't come to me saying, well, I think, Burgess, I was the reincarnation of Alexandra.
Let's do a session and find out.
That doesn't happen. She just came for therapy, and this spontaneously came through very organically.
And was this a first session, or was it several sessions
This
later?
was several sessions in.
Okay.
But she went to the death, as you said, right at the first session. But she re-experienced being a woman in the cold with a young family, and she remembered being rushed away into an underground room as if they were being hidden somewhere. And she said, they're telling us that they're moving us for our own safety, but they're actually betraying us, and I don't trust them. The next thing she remembered, and she relived all of her family being shot in that underground room, and them all being killed and assassinated. Now, this immediately triggered me because I thought, well, this sounds very much like the Tsar's family.
And did your client clue in at that point, or they were
Not
just so deep in trance?
She was just in the horror of it. I mean, it was horrible. Can you imagine not only her being killed, but the children and her husband. So she was very much into that. But we did a little bit more, and she got a sense that this was sort of Russia. It felt like Russia. She kept saying things, and so I asked her subconscious if this past life was in Russia, and the subconscious said yes. And with the other information that she gave me in that session, towards the end of the session, I just felt I had to ask the question. And bear in mind, when we ask these questions, as we know, we're only asking yes/no questions of the subconscious using a finger response. But I did ask, is this person that you're experiencing in the past life, is this person involved with the Russian royal family? Yes. Okay, was this person Alexandra the Tsar's wife? And the finger came up right away, yes. So immediately we knew that we were onto a very, very significant past life. So she was very shocked, as you can imagine, and she came out of trance. She knows nothing about this period of history. It's not something she's ever studied. And I asked her not to research, because we always do this, don't we? You know, we don't say, well, you may be in this person, now go and read all the books.
And they want to, right? That's the instinct, is now I want to read everything. And you say, no, do the opposite. Do not read anything.
Because obviously if they come back to us to do some more regressions, then they've read about it. They can just be what's called confabulation. They can come bringing through information from previous knowledge into the regression, which isn't then trustworthy. So she agreed that wasn't going to happen. And then obviously she got in touch with you, had a chat with you, and I think she was pretty shocked, wasn't she, about that?
Yeah, there's often a shock. I know in our first part of our famous past lives episode, we talked about some of our other clients, and I feel with her and then the client I worked with that was Mary Queen of Scots, there's this, I don't know, disbelief. I think there's this misconception that everyone wants to be famous. And at least in these instances I've found with these two individuals, it's quite the opposite of, I don't want that. Yes. Yeah. I don't want any of this. It's almost like they kind of push it away and don't want to believe it. And I think at least for these two, it took a while to accept that, okay, maybe this is the truth. And us, of course, we are not feeding them information the whole time. We're just letting it come through. But sometimes it takes, they say something and we're here doing the research behind the scenes and we tell them, that's actually bang on accurate. Yeah. And I find sometimes it's that confirmation that almost gives them that boost to go into it and to accept it as the reality. But I mean, they don't want to often. There's no benefit to them. And usually it's really weird. It's weird. And it's it's hard to get your mind. And
we should also say that all of our clients are normal people. They're not people who have got weirdness in them. They're just normal people who have got issues that need to be healed. Yeah. So, when this comes through, it can be very shocking. So then we began the journey, really, of working with this client, moving through Alexandra's life. And what I expected, because I didn't know very much about this period of history until I started to research it because of this client. What I expected was that Alexandra's life, being a member of the royal family, she came from a German royal family, married the Tsar. I expected it to be grandiose and beautiful and grand balls and big frocks and lots of jewellery, etc., etc. The standard Hollywood take on royalty. What actually came through in our sessions in Alexandra's life was pure abject misery. From session after session after session. And so we went back, and we'll just run through some of the things that came through briefly in the sessions. And firstly, Alexandra as a child. And my client felt that her mother died when Alexandra was young. And that was the truth. Actually, I think she was 6 or 7, I can't remember now. Yeah. The damage that did to Alexandra, she and there was one very, very vivid memory that came through in several sessions. The young child Alexandra spent a lot of the time on her own in a miserable state underneath something that was like a grand piano or a big old table or something like that. Just a lot of the time in unhappiness and sadness as a very lonely child after her mother's death. And I think that was one of the main turning points in her life. So then as she grew up, She was a sort of a relatively unhappy teenager.
And the books talk about that too. The books that we've both kind of looked in on the topic, that was almost a turning point, that she was a happy child before then, and there was something that just switched in that moment, that ever since that there was more of a seriousness to her. That kind of childhood innocence just fell away.
Yeah, it was such a trauma.
Yeah.
A massive trauma.
And she'd lost a sister at the time.
Oh, did she?
As well, too. Yes, it was a sickness that was going through the family. So she lost both her mother and her sister. And that would make sense. Everyone is trying to get the household back together. So she was on her own a lot of the time. But you can imagine you're just this carefree child, and then the shock of it hits you. But it wasn't anything that she got, I don't know, she didn't get therapy on, right? So she lived the rest of her life.
I think she was just left a lot on her own as a child.
Yeah.
So moving through the teenage years, and then we come to the time when she comes into contact with Nicholas, and she falls deeply in love with him, and that came through very much in the sessions, and that again surprised me, because I thought most royal marriages were just sort of arranged marriages, and you were stuck with this person whether you liked it or not. But my client said this, that she turned down several people. I think her aunt was Queen Victoria, who wanted people to marry her. She turned them down. She wanted to marry Nicholas. And the love for Nicholas was there all the way through those sessions. And again, that's in the history books, that she didn't want anybody else. She fell in love with Nicholas. And that was, again, a significant turning point. But unfortunately, then there's the other side. She gets to Russia and things start to go wrong. And she's then under constant pressure, and that pressure was there session after session. Yeah.
It's constantly under pressure and constantly putting a mask on.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really interesting to the other side. You read about these historical figures like their characters in a book, and I find these sessions really what we talked about in our previous episode. It puts flesh on the person, and on the outside there's this mask on, but like you said, it's chaos in the background, and you have to put on your smile and go about your day ruling a country.
And what came through in the sessions again, this is in the history books, and remember, this lady had never read anything like this, never seen anything, she'd never studied these periods, this period of history, was the pressure of being a monarch for a country that didn't want her there. Because generally the Russian people didn't like her and were very much against her. And she felt that pressure.
She's a bit of an introvert as well, too, I remember reading. So that doesn't work in your favor when
of course.
You don't want to go out in public.
Yeah, and she couldn't speak the language for a long time. She was a slightly different branch of Christianity and had to convert to Russian Orthodox Christianity. So there was a lot of things against her. And the Russian people did not like her, and she felt that quite deeply. And she couldn't understand this because she thought she was a nice person. She was also an intelligent person. I remember in one of the sessions she said, my husband doesn't allow me to become involved in his political sort of meetings, the meetings with the diplomats and the politicians, but I feel that I could have a role in that. I could say something, but he doesn't allow me to do that. So there was this constant unhappiness, which actually, it was like it was there all the way through her life. She was just unhappy all through her life. She loved her husband. She brought 5 children into the world, 4 girls and 1 boy.
Well, there's a pressure too of the constantly trying to bring a male heir as well too. And remember, there's weird. What was it? It was in one of the books. They ended up, I think, by the 3rd or 4th daughter, going somewhere to try and do these different rituals to try and conceive a male heir. And you could imagine, if they don't like her already and you're producing all these female heirs, all the pressure that would have been, because that would have been your role. That is your role as a woman, a female monarch at the time, is to produce the male heir, and that wasn't working.
And of course, when she did produce Alexei, the young son, then within a short time they found he had a haemophilia. He was a haemophiliac. And so then there was after the euphoria of having the son, then there was all the misery and fear about his illness. And she was very fearful in the sessions. Again, the pressure was there. She worried about the boy. She took control of his illness in a way. When he was ill, she would spend all night with him for days after days, just being with him, comforting the boy in his pain. And again, that came through in the sessions, the love of a mother and the desperate need for the boy to be well. And this, in a way, is where Rasputin comes in. So, of course, Rasputin...
That's what everyone's interested in, right? Because this is what all the ABBA songs and, Disney movies portray him as this big villain. So it was... was he the big villain?
Well, in a way, he was and he wasn't. So again, in the sessions, she said that, Rasputin healed the boy on a couple of occasions, and that gave a great faith in him as a spiritual or a religious man. And then again, in the history books, the Russian people generally hated him. A lot of people were hated Rasputin, and I think he was his own worst enemy in a way.
Well, did that come through in this session? We were looking at some of the notes ahead of time, and it was talking about that she wished he would just stop talking, that he would learn how to hold his tongue, because they had this friendship, and she thought that if he just would hold his tongue, that things would get better, but he couldn't. He couldn't.
You're right. Yeah.
And so she got upset at him.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah. And yet she stuck with him. She had this total belief in him as a sort of savior for the child. And they're very, very, very close. I mean, they did become close, as it is known.
Almost a mentor.
It was
figure,
a mentor, good word.
Right?
Yeah. But she was unhappy with him at times. But I remember in the sessions, in one session, people are telling me about what he's doing, but I don't believe it. I don't believe what they're saying. She wouldn't accept that this man had a darker side. And then when he died, she was bereft, and that again came through in the session. And she felt betrayed, didn't she?
Yeah, that you went and got yourself killed. If you would just, have held your tongue, then none of this had happened. And now you went and offed yourself. Well, he didn't off himself, but you got yourself killed, and now you left me here to pick up the pieces when everything was falling apart already.
Yeah, absolutely, because this was, during the First World War, it was all starting to
it's like you abandoned,
society.
Right? That abandonment.
And she was left very much alone.
Yeah.
And what came through again was a sort of the depression really, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was interesting, that aspect, the mental health aspect.
The mental health aspect. We feel, having looked at this in depth, that actually Alexandra had mental health problems. And at one point she was injecting herself with some sort of drugs, whatever they were, we don't know. And again, that I don't think is commonly known in the history books, but we both feel that she had some sort of mental health problem that just got worse as time went on, partly because of the pressure she was under, partly because it was there in the first place, and partly because of just sort of the general unhappiness of being in a country where people don't want you.
It's an interesting parallel where she came to you, the client in this life, for an anxiety state, and you're discovering that there was the depression and anxiety kind of as a main vein running through Alexandra's life as well, too.
Good point. Yeah. And I think there was something else about Rasputin and her. They used to discuss politics, I think, didn't they? Something like that.
Yeah, I remember she was telling me a lot about that after, because it's interesting. These are the bits of history that plays are written about, so it's very intriguing to find out the details. And I remember she told me that they would just walk and talk and discuss politics and life and religion and kind of bigger picture things, really in that mentorship role of kind of opening her eyes to there was more than I think maybe her religion contained her in a box, and here was a person that kind of blew that open a little bit for her.
And that was interesting as well, because these discussions, as Monique said, in the history books, it's thought that, and it was thought at the time, that Rasputin was using his influence with her to get to the Tsar in order to either raise his status or to get rid of people who didn't like him. Yeah. So that again is an unusual thing for a client to say, but which fits in with what is actually in the history books. But I think that betrayal by Rasputin, it wasn't betrayal, well, it was in a way, by dying. It left her very much on her own. The Tsar was sort of away trying to sort the First World War out in Russia. And that, I think that was, again, a massive trauma that affected her in a very big, big way.
I don't think she opened up herself to a lot of people. I remember reading that in one of the books about how she respected Nicholas and she wanted to open herself up to more people, but she knew she wasn't supposed to do that. That, might leak out details. So although she had friends around her, I don't know how much she actually talked to them. It almost seemed like Rasputin was the first person that she opened that part of herself to, or trusted enough to do that. Yeah.
And then as we go through towards the end of the life, then there's a period where the Bolsheviks imprison the Russian royal family. And this imprisonment, I think, takes place for about 2 years or something. And at that stage, the misery intensifies. At that stage, my client was very, very scared and anxious, helpless, because they were trapped, and quite desperate. And her mental health at that stage really went down. Alexandra's not my clients, but Alexandra's mental health really got worse and worse because they were losing their authority. They didn't know what was happening. They were imprisoned and treated towards the end very, very badly. So there was a desperateness all the way through that final sort of period of Alexandra's life. And that really came through in the sessions. The client was very, very, very deeply unhappy.
And that part lingered, I remember, for a long time, the end of the life. And really kind of led through for my friend for a while. It was just such an intense energy. And the death, too, that the amount of times that, usually if it's a tough one, we go through what? But what's a tough one? 5 times kind of thing?
Times, yeah.
And what was this one?
I don't know. It kept coming up, didn't it?
It was over and over and over.
Yeah. The death was just so traumatic. And of course then, as well as that, for Alexandra, she felt guilty. It's as if guilty that her family had been killed partly because of her. That was what came through as well.
Well, that was a weird twist in events, too, that I remember she was so insistent on, as in the history books, it said they were killed first, correct? Her and Nicholas, and then the children. But I remember my friend saying, no, like every time, and I've gone through this death, like who knows how many times over and over and over, and it's the same thing. It's the kids first. And it was a punishment. It was a punishment that you have to watch your kids first. And even though the books say the other way around, but I remember she was so persistent that no, every time I see it, it is exactly like that. It's the kids first, and then us. So that's kind of interesting. It makes you think a little bit of who's writing the history in the books. And well, there's only one side. They couldn't write their side of things. So what's really going on? It just it makes you think a little bit more about.
Well, it could be that the killers, the killers actually knew that if it got out that they made the children suffer and punished the family and tortured them like that, that would be too much, even at that time where things were very brutal. So they glossed it over. The parents were killed, then the children. It all happened very quickly. But we don't have to believe that, because these people were saying things in order to appear to be better than they were, you could say.
Especially when you have a client that's there and in a very heightened emotional state too. It's not like they're talking about this just matter of factly. It's they are very in it.
Very in it. Yeah. So and this as a past life has been very unusual, because it's taken a lot of healing. This is not a 2 or 3 session cure, far from it.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of regression sessions, and every now and again, actually, once we thought we'd healed Alexandra, she'd pop up again in several sessions later, you could say, when we're in a different past life. But the underlying thing for me is I think we've come upon something which isn't really in the history books, that Alexandra was probably clinically depressed or had some sort of mental health problem, and that, I think, was with her all of her life, and then she went into the worst case scenario as an introvert in a foreign country as a member of royalty. It almost makes you think about Lady Diana, an introvert pushed into a role she didn't want, and the unhappiness that caused.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is that as we've healed that life, my client has got better and better. So the anxieties that were causing have lessened. Okay, I'm still working with this lady, but they're far less than they were, and her healing is moving on nicely. But it was a tough past life to work on. It really was.
Less triggered, I find she is around the whole life too. At first it was all very intense, and it was even seeing any of the names pop up in, random everyday life circumstances, or coming across someone with the same name as her, or someone in the family would just right away set things off for a period of time.
Okay,
and that has all sort of eased down. It's like you can finally just put it to rest.
Lay it to rest.
Yeah. And we've talked about too before of, okay, what are the bigger implications that is it just the client you're healing, or are you also healing this person in the past? Or what we say is the past. We don't really know. It could be, it could be parallel. It could all be happening all at the same time. But are there bigger implications? Are you sending, like when we do ancestral healing, and there's a school of thought that you're not just healing the person in front of you, but that whole line. So are you healing down the lines of history?
Very much so.
It's kind of an interesting thought.
One final thing with Alexandra is that my client, Monique's friend, has got 2 children, and both of those children, as it came through in a session, are the reincarnations of Alexandra's children. So that's in there as well. So these clusters of souls, these groups of souls that follow us life after life. So 2 of Alexandra's children have been reborn with my client as her children now.
And with similar
issues.
demeanors and issues.
Ways of being, apparently,
And I know we have a whole episode on surrogate regression, but it's really interesting as she was working in her life and working on different relationship issues she had with some of those children. It's softened that in her children in this life.
Yes, yeah.
So that's a whole different topic altogether. But not only is it helping her and possibly down the line of history, but her children in this current life.
Yeah.
It's helping them as well too. So it's interesting when you see that parallel, because often you switch roles. We talk about, that you were husband and wife one life, and now you're mother and daughter in this life. So it's interesting that it's similar roles then or now, almost like it was a copy and paste. It was like a copy and paste in this life and that life, and like, okay, you got to fix what was going on there. But all those little tiny details all make it really quite fascinating. Yeah.
So that's a little bit about past life as Alexandra. And just as a brief aside, I'm also working with at the moment a gentleman who was the reincarnation, or is the reincarnation, of the Russian composer Scriabin. And he was around at the time of course, the Russian royal family at that time. So,
and when this mysticism was really big, right? I remember we were looking a little bit into that, and he was
very much.
They were very obsessed with mystical things, and then Rasputin kind of comes into that too, with the whole mystical fascination. So, it'd be interesting to maybe get them together, or see if they come in, or maybe she was listening to his music. It would be interesting to see.
Well, I'd like to see try and find in a history book if Scriabin ever met the Russian royal family. Yeah. Because then there is a possibility, if both clients agreed, of them actually meeting up on Zoom and seeing if they sort of recognised each other.
Which you've done once, right?
Of course, with Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary.
Yeah. So. But that one didn't turn out so great. That was a loving reunion. It's fascinating.
Okay, so hope you've enjoyed listening to us again, and looking forward to seeing you again on another podcast, another episode of Adventures in Regression Therapy. Thanks for watching. Bye from Canada.
Thanks for listening to Adventures in Regression Therapy. For more information about Steve Burgess and his team, check out steveburgesshypnosis.com or connect on Facebook or Instagram. Steve's books The Power of Past Life Regression and Famous Past Lives are available through his website and Amazon, and are available as audiobooks through Audible. Free hypnotherapy recordings are available on YouTube on Hypno for All. That's Hypno, the number 4, all.